Hi there and welcome to Fyendal's Library. Now today we're going to be talking about a new hero in flesh and blood, Levia. She's a shadow-born abomination, a brute of power and corruption, with a fierce appetite to match, and she was just announced for the new Monarch release. The name Levia means joined and is a Hebrew name. It could be based on the Leviathan, which is a multi-headed sea serpent or monster that was slain by God, and given, parts of it were given as food to the Hebrews for them to eat. And we'll soon see from her backstory that the idea of food is very central to Levia's tale, and that of becoming joined to the dark world of Irathiel, a world that could be a mirror to the land of Wraith. We're told that in the land of Irathiel, the currency is power or blood, and while Levia certainly wields power, she is very much tied to the currency of blood. And her ability plays into that. It allows her to keep her bloodlust from destroying her, preventing the damage dealt by blood debt, a new mechanic that deals damage to your hero in the end phase for each blood debt card you have in your banish zone. So this blood debt can be used to pay for powerful cards, and it can also be used as sort of a downside to allow the cards to be stronger, because if you just leave them in your banish zone, they'll do damage to you every turn. Levia can stop this though by whenever she discards a card with 6 or more power, a very common brute mechanic, she doesn't get dealt that damage, and I think that's meant to represent her being in control of her bloodlust or being able to use it. She's using these cards, but she's not actually taking the damage. But of course, if you do not discard a card with 6 or more power, you're going to take a lot of damage at the end of the turn, so that kind of represents her almost losing her fight with her bloodlust to take all that damage. So we're told that Levia is a willing pawn in the Demonastery's plan, and it's not just that, she also acts as a gateway for what's described as a demon of shadow, a creature known as the Soul Harvester, Blasphemophet. So this is maybe a portmanteau, difficult word to pronounce, of blasphemy and prophet, so Blasphemophet. And it's sort of this unholy combination linked to a throne of blood, which we see on the new card Doomsday, which is a unique card just for Levia, and this art for this Doomsday card was that skull throne that we saw in the previous video in the art pre-release. But today we're going to talk about the lore of Levia and her backstory, which was also released on the Flesh and Blood website at the same time as the announcement of the new hero. So let's tell that story now, and I hope you enjoy hearing about this brand new hero and her incredibly dark and gruesome past. So Levia was born in poverty, taken in alongside her mother by a noble family in a place called the Northern Realms. Northern Realms is not somewhere that's labelled on the map of Wraith, but I guess our assumption would be that it's above Solana, maybe just below Metrix. Maybe we'll get more information on that soon. This noble family were called the Barthamonts, and they lived in this dark and twisted mansion. Levia's father had been a stable hand, and he'd mysteriously vanished, and the family had been left destitute. Her mother felt she had no choice but to go to the mansion and ask for them to take her and her daughter in. But her mother too had vanished after several years of service in the mansion. But a few days before she vanished, she came to Levia, who at this point was just a girl, and warned her to flee the mansion at the first opportunity she got, and to not look back. The Barthamont estate was this mansion of madness and corruption. Servants fought each other over these little measly morsels of food. They were starving, and all the nobles that were there who came to visit, or the Barthamonts themselves, gorged themselves on these fantastic feasts. Lord Barthamont spent many days and weeks away from the estate, hunting, while Lady Barthamont sort of ruled the mansion, and she's described as drawing this sense of satisfaction from the squalid state of the manor. So Levia would walk the mansion by night, no doubt looking for the truth as to what happened to her mother, trying to find out what had happened, where she had disappeared to. She hadn't fled the mansion as her mother had told her to do. In fact, she'd stayed there with this sort of stubborn determination. So while exploring the mansion, she heard what's described as a distant and muffled scream, but still shrill and piercing. It was described as a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. She went in direction of the sound to the solid oak door, and there, her eye in the keyhole, she saw a crimson-soaked room and heard the laughter of Lady Barthamont. Levia could feel this energy in the room, a powerful energy, and it hummed in the air like an impending thunderstorm is how it's described, that sort of electricity in the air, and you can feel that something huge is coming. At the Lady Barthamont's feet there were sigils shining, going red one by one, and it was flooding the room with this deep red light. Bodies of the servants were on the floor, and looking through the keyhole, Levia saw Lady Barthamont fall upon those servants, and she devoured them. She ate them in a frenzy. Levia felt fear and anger at this cannibalism. It disgusted her, but it intrigued her as well. She recognized in this scene a possibility, an escape, a way for her, a chance for a creature like her who lacked power, who lacked agency, to seize control of her own self and her own destiny. Even if the cost was to lose a grip on her own humanity, she was to become like Lady Barthamont herself, and with that take the power and free herself. So she would return to the room night after night and study the rituals as Lady Barthamont performed them. She performed rituals on small animals, testing herself and pushing the limits of her decency further and further. It all led up to a grand banquet, which was hosted by Lady Barthamont herself. The tables were laid with a grand feast, but there were no guests. Just 12 half-starved servants were in the room, Levia included. The candles on the tables sputtered, and roasted meats glistened in that flashing light. Fresh bread and cups of wine, candied fruits and nuts. The smell must have been overpowering to the servants, who not so long ago would have fought each other near to death for just a single lick of a discarded plate. One of the youngest servants reached out. He took a small buttered biscuit in hand, and he began to eat it. Thunder erupted in the room. Doors slammed shut. They had taken a bite from the depths of hell, and now they were cursed to burn. Curtains slid back, and the nobles stood there, ready to watch the scene below. A droning noise of sheer brutality filled the room, and the servants fell. Blood ran on the walls, and their bodies began to dissolve. Their very bones burnt, that stinking smell of it filling the room, that acrid scent filling Levia's nostrils and throat. Levia knew what she had to do, even as her own skin began to melt. She enacted her rituals and fell upon the nearest body, filling her mouth with raw meat. Through the gore and mist, she saw a dark creature with a gaping maw of 100 massive fangs. The creature came for her, but she dodged its claws' attacks. She had this newfound flexibility and agility. And then she attacked the beast herself, and she tore at it, and she felt its flesh tear. She now had talons where her hands had once been, claws that could cut through flesh, and she saw black blood spill forth from the cuts that she herself had inflicted on this dark beast. She leapt back and landed on the marble floor, and it cracked beneath her weight and power. The bloodlust faded, and she looked down at her left hand, where the dull eyes of Lady Barthamont sat in her disembodied head. She was free from her master's control, but where did this newfound strength come from, and who did she now owe for its use? Thank you for listening to my newest video. We'll be doing new lore videos on the new heroes as they're announced, but for now, I hope you've enjoyed this content, and if you'd like to see more, feel free to subscribe. Good night.